I've always been interested in geisha and the traditional culture behind it, but the thing that truly jump-started my interest was reading Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden, and it I can't say it changed my perspective on anything because I didn't really know much. However, I can say that it is a part of my favorite book, my favorite book list, and I'm not even gonna go into a rant about that because then we'd be here all day and that's not what this is about. So, yeah, it kind of drove me to do a bit of research, specifically how being a geisha was during wartime, World War II time, and then post-war time. I shall be reading from my handy-dandy iPad, so I'm not making eye contact with you all. Gion is Kyoto's most famous geisha district, originating as an entertainment district in the Sengoku period in front of Yasaka Shrine. The Sengoku period was a period in Japanese history that involved civil wars and social upheavals such as vassals rebelling against their lords, which continuously took place in the 15th and 16th century. It was originally built to accommodate travelers and shrine visitors, but little did they know it would eventually evolve and become one of the most exclusive and well-revered geisha districts in all of Japan. Although many call them as the term geisha, they themselves in Kyoto do not refer to themselves as such, rather using the local term geiko, which essentially translates to a woman of art, whereas geisha just means artist or person of the arts. According to tokidatokyo.com, the first geisha were actually men geishas, or taikomochi, also known as hokan, appearing around the year 1730. Hold on, I'm gonna take a pause. I did good research on this. However, if there's anything that I missed within this video, please let me know, most definitely. I'm always open to learning more things, so yeah. It goes on explaining that it was only about 30 years later that female geisha began to incorporate themselves into that traditional culture of being a geisha, if I phrase that properly. Yeah, they started to appear as forms of odoriko, meaning dancers, or shamisen players. It's safe to say that women took over the profession and clearly dominated it, and this was by the year 1780. The original role of a geisha was as an assistant to the Orien, I hope I'm saying that right, high class as well as expensive Japanese courtesan. That being said, geisha were forbid. They were forbid from forming personal relations with other people in fear of them stealing customers, which is pretty crazy to me. That would eventually change in the 1800s as the popularity of the Orient began to wane in the Meiji period, and as their popularity began to wane, the geisha popularity began to wax. So if we're talking in moon terms. High expensive people, their time was over, so it was now the time for the geishas to gain popularity, and they soon became the vital face actually, of hospitality and entertainment, hosting parties for big corporations, companies, as well as government officials. Continuously, in the 1920s, there were about 80,000 geisha, which is pretty insane. However, once the country became involved in international warfare, the prestige and position of geisha were threatened. With the westernization after the Meiji period, which was between 1868 and 1912, the number of geisha began to plummet, with the approach of World War II playing a crucial role. Due to the rationing in wartime, many women were forced into other occupations. Most popularly working in factories, doing mutation creation, vehicles, pharmaceuticals, and electrical goods for the army. But despite the hardships of factory work, there were worse fates that sadly awaited these women. During the war, women were forced into sexual slavery. by Japanese Imperial Army and were forced to serve as military personnel in comfort stations. Women from Korea, China, and the Philippines were tricked into believing that they were getting a legit job. However, they were just actually abducted into sexual slavery. And popular religions such as Shintoism and Buddhism did not forbid prostitution or consider sexual misconduct, sinful in the Christian sense. This was all in good faith to prevent such crimes as rape and other sex crimes done by the military. And in their defense, the idea of providing men with women that were, and I quote, ready access would diminish further violent crimes on women. This approach continued after the American occupation, and initially the Japanese government created an, and I quote once again, amusement association to ensure that a ready population of prostitutes would be available to service American soldiers. The association also ensured that there were regular STD checkups. They also had an intention to entice women that were already originally a part of the sex industry, but they ended up forcing them to work anyways. And this happened up until 1947, when an imperial ordinance began to punish people enticing or forcing women into prostitution. Okay, so during this time, prostitutes wore traditional clothing and makeup similar to geishas, and Americans, not knowing about their culture in depth, began to mix them up, and they were unable to differentiate or understand the concept of paid non-sexual companionship. According to geishaofjapan.com, all Mizu Shobai women, like dancers, nightclub hostess, or night walkers, were all lumped together as geisha girls. Consequently, this term became synonymous with prostitution and geisha, with it a misunderstanding that continues in the West today. Stop being ignorant. Educate yourselves, guys. Why is this even still a thing? Prostitution would remain legal and relatively common up until the 1950s. In 1945, the government began to re-allow the practices of the geishas in tea houses and bars and geisha houses. However, the vast majority of geisha were aged between 20 and 24, with a good bit of them retiring in mid-20s after finding a patron, also known as a supporter. And this supporter would be a man, and he would pay for their housing, just, I wouldn't say like a sugar daddy type of relationship, but sort of. Even though the war was over and work was reopened, there was a lot of extreme difficulties for geisha. One specifically being how during the war, a lot of prostitutes began to call themselves geisha. So basically, by the prostitutes labeling themselves as geisha when they were not geisha, it diminished the reputation and the title of actual geisha. Due to this, the number of geisha rapidly dropped, resulting in the westernization of geisha, such as serving cocktails over sake, learning Western dances, and wearing Western-styled dresses. The younger girls, which were about 7 or 8, preferred to work as bar dancers or models over the traditional training of a geisha, because at 8 or 7 years old, that is when the training would start. In 1960, the government passed the compulsory education law, which meant young girls could no longer be trained as geishas, and it turned out to be the biggest downfall of the geisha population. Patrons at this time also started leaving their geisha, which in 1989, according to the New York Times, there was an estimated 600 to 700 geisha left throughout the whole of Japan. And from 80,000 to 600 or 700 geisha in the whole of Japan is a huge plummet. Some facts, maybe they're fun facts to you, maybe they're weird facts to others, but facts anyways to close out this very short video. Many non-Japanese women began participating in the training to becoming geisha back during that time, and it's still happening today. You can look it up. It's still happening today. This fact I find very, very weird and unsettling. Geishas used to sell their virginities, and men used to pay for it. Big, big, big bucks. Huge bucks. In 1956, there was an anti-prostitution law that was passed, and thankfully the practice was outlawed, and they categorized it under the traffic in human flesh. Also, in Memoirs of a Geisha, I forgot the character's name, this man, I read the book a while ago, but he was pretty rich, and he was known for paying geisha for their virginities, and a lot of the well-known geisha had lost their virginities to this man, and creepily enough, he had this briefcase that he would bring, and inside of the briefcase was a whole bunch of white sheets cut into squares, and they had blood on them, because when a woman first has sex, she bleeds in some cases, but in these cases, they do, and he just has a briefcase of it, and he carries it around, and that's that, and that's pretty weird. Yeah. Anyways, thank you for watching this very awkward video, and if you want more very awkward, informational, short videos, please subscribe. And if I missed anything, if there was some misinformation in here, I apologize, but please do tell me. I realize I didn't touch on the actual traditions and ceremonies and practices of geisha before the World War, like what they would do in their everyday life, life at the tea houses, life at the geisha schools, because that's not what this video was about. 2 books I would recommend. One, Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. It's really good. I like the book. A lot of people say that it is inaccurate, and I totally get that. But, if you do want a historically accurate book about geisha, I just ordered it, but I read about it, and I got recommended it on Reddit. This book here, I forgot the name. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I am Nana, and this is Nana, and we're out.